around 15 degrees Celsius, quite up above par for the time of year. Throughout Saturday evening, that band in the north continues to push its way eastwards. We could see some stronger winds for a time across the Highlands and into Orkney with some coastal gales. But elsewhere, the showers will tend to ease their way off as we move into the night. So a slightly chillier night to come here underneath those clearer intervals. But it means that we start off Sunday with much more drier weather around. And actually Sunday looking like a pretty fine day for many of us. Some cloud just lingering across the far east coast of England, and the cloud will begin to build throughout Northern Ireland as well later on in the day. And it's these frontal systems that will then start pushing across the rest of the UK as we move into the start of the new working week. Low pressure then returns as we move into the new week, and it will turn unsettled once again with further spells of cloud and rain, but temperatures generally staying on the mild side. Bye-bye.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight, and a busy 3 hours ahead. At 9 o'clock following Wednesday's budget, things are tough. But as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. My first on-air reaction to the financial event of the year, the budget, that's at 9. And it might take at 10, you won't believe this story. The charity Oxfam has banned the use of the word mother. If we don't push back on this madness, it will only get worse. But up next, with a range of pay deals in the offing, are the unions now running Britain? Have the government folded to the union barons? Also, we'll be speaking to former Tory and UKIP MP, the co-founder of Vote Leave, Douglas Carswell. Is high immigration a Brexit betrayal? And with criticism of lads' mags, should we let boys be boys? Discussing that, Kim Woodburn from How Clean Is Your House? A very busy 3 hours, lots to get through. But first, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against the Russian president. It's accusing Vladimir Putin of war crimes against Ukraine, including the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. The Kremlin has described the claims as outrageous and says it doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Russia must be held accountable.
This is a historic moment in the conflict in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court, which operates independently, has issued an indictment for President Putin and the Children's Commissioner for appalling crimes against children. And whilst they operate independently, it's really important the international community support them and give them the tools to do the job, which is why I'll be hosting on Monday with my Dutch opposite number 40 countries from around the world to give them the support to conduct the investigations, to look after witnesses, to care for the victims so that they can see this through and, we hope, have accountability for those appalling crimes.
Security guards at Heathrow Airport are to strike for 10 days over Easter in a dispute over pay. Unite Union says over 1,400 of its members at Terminal 5 will walk out from the 31st of March after voting in favour of industrial action. The airport says it has contingency plans in place to deal with the strike, but is urging the union to discuss its proposed 10% pay rise. More than 175,000 appointments had to be postponed during this week's junior doctors' strike to protect emergency care. NHS boss Professor Sir Stephen Powers has called the three-day walkout unprecedented. He said it's had a greater impact than all other action we've seen so far this winter combined. Leaders of striking doctors have called for a meeting with the Health Secretary to try to resolve the pay dispute. The British Medical Association is demanding a 35% pay increase. Police Constable Mary Ellen Betley-Smith will keep her job despite being found guilty for attacking a former Aston Villa football player with a taser and a baton. Former striker Dalian Atkinson died after being kicked at least twice in the head by another officer, Benjamin Monk, who's been jailed for 8 years for manslaughter. Ms Betley-Smith was cleared of assaulting Mr Atkinson after a trial, but the Independent Office for Police Conduct found there was a gross misconduct disciplinary case to answer for her use of force. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have been celebrating St Patrick's Day with the Irish Guards. Kate and William have attended the St Patrick's Day parade in Aldershot. It's Kate's first time at the parade as Colonel of the regiment. The royal couple also met with past members of the Irish Guards. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan Tonight.
My thanks to Tatiana, who's back in exactly an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Before 9, with a range of pay deals in the offing, are the unions now running Britain? We'll discuss that with top journalist Petronella Wyatt. As annual immigration figures are in the hundreds of thousands, is high immigration a Brexit betrayal? We'll be asking the co-founder of Vote Leave, Douglas Carswell. And with criticism about lads' mags in the news, is it time to just let boys be boys? We'll be discussing that with Kim Woodburn from How Clean Is Your House. Also, there's going to be a middle-aged Love Island. Will you watch it? There's hope for all of us. So lots to get through. After 9, in my big opinion. Following Wednesday's budget, things are tough. But as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. My first on-air reaction to the financial event of the year, Wednesday's budget. And in my take at 10, you will not believe this story. My mother is furious. The charity Oxfam have banned the use of the word mother. You can't say mother anymore or father. If we don't push back on this madness, it will only get worse. You won't want to miss my take at 10. My Mark Meets guest is a military hero, former Black Rod of Parliament, and the man who accused former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow of bullying. Lieutenant General Arundel David Leakey is live at 10 o'clock. So lots to get through. This is Mark Dolan tonight. It's Friday night, so we want to have some fun, don't we? Possibly something cold and fizzy in the fridge, or maybe fire up the kettle and let's have a night to remember. And how could I not wish you all a happy St. Patrick's Day? I will out myself. It's my birthday today, and I was that close to being called Patrick, but they went for Mark. It's served me quite well. So thanks to my parents for bringing me into the world. And well, everybody that's celebrating tonight, have a great time. And we will make sure that there are plenty of Patrick Day vibes throughout the show. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Now, NHS unions have good news, actually, on Paddy's night. They've reached a pay deal with the government in a major breakthrough that could herald the end of strikes by frontline staff in England. The offer consists of a one-off payment of 2% of their salary plus a COVID recovery bonus of 4% for the current financial year 2022-2023 and a 5% increase for next year. It will apply to key NHS workers, including nurses and paramedics. Meanwhile, the UK's biggest rail union, the RMT, has suspended strikes at Network Rail and will hold a vote on a new pay offer. The new offer equates to a pay rise of up to 14.4% for the lowest paid workers and 9.2% for the highest paid. So is this the good news that we'll see the end of industrial action, which has been so disruptive for the country, or has this government caved to the unions? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome newspaper columnist and broadcaster Petronella Wyatt. What do you think, Petronella? Who's running Britain? Is it the unions?
No, it's definitely the government. And I have to say that while I have no sympathy with the train drivers, I have the utmost sympathy with nurses and junior docs. And for example, give me 7 MPs, I can make you 7 train drivers. Give me 7 train drivers, couldn't make you 1 junior doc or nurse. They do remarkable jobs. They're highly skilled. They work appalling hours. I have friends who are in nursing. They work from 6:30 a.m. till 9 p.m. They now have to deal with abuse from drunks who come into A&E. The working conditions have deteriorated in the last 10 years. And the other problem is that the hospital trust used to provide accommodation and financial aid to junior docs, and they won't do this anymore because they're too greedy and they'd rather spend the money on making themselves look better. So we have a situation where you have a junior doc who won't be able to get a decent job for 10 years because of the training, who is living on a salary that's hardly larger than that of a porter. And I honestly have total sympathy for these people. And I know, because I know them well, that this is a last resort for them. They only strike because they're utterly, utterly desperate.
However, do you think that the strikes, particularly in relation to the ambulance drivers, nurses and junior doctors, that it could bring the NHS into disrepute, particularly for those whose families or loved ones have been affected by the strikes?
No, I don't think so, because first of all, with the nurses, they've arranged cover from bank and agencies, so there are just as many nurses working during the strike as there would be if there wasn't a strike. So actually nobody is losing out. I don't think it's bringing the NHS into disrepute. I mean, not the people who work for it. I think it's bringing the hospital trusts into disrepute, because this is what we have to focus on. I don't know if you ever watched repeats of the old Doctor films with Dirk Bogarde.
Love those movies.
Of course, you remember they were all living high on the hog, the junior doctors.
Yeah.
They had free accommodation, they had
drinking
port.
cocktails in the evening.
Exactly, exactly. That was what was provided. The salary was similar, but they got everything else. Nowadays, if you're a junior doctor, you get nothing. And I know some junior doctors who are literally begging for accommodation and having to sort of bed down together in sort of one-room flat.
Well, I guess we have to look after those
who look after us.
Can I ask you overall then, because this is good news. It's Friday night. It's good to start with good news, which is a pay deal in the offing in regards to the nurses, and many would say that they deserve that pay rise. They didn't get 19%, which was a bit optimistic. I think we can all agree about that. A possible deal with the RMT as well. This in the context of Rishi Sunak's Brexit breakthrough, the Windsor framework. We've got Stop the Boats. We've got an economy which seems to have settled down somewhat. Does this government have momentum?
I think it does. I mean, the wonderful thing about Rishi is that he...
No one's ever started a sentence like that before.
Well, there's always a first, isn't there? No, I love Rishi because he under-promises and over-delivers, which makes him the perfect politician. And he really has over-delivered, because we didn't expect this of him, did we? You didn't.
Well, the Windsor framework seems to have pleased some Eurosceptics, although it remains to be...
I think it's the majority...
You know the ERG. Do you think they'll support it in the Commons?
He said he doesn't care. I don't think the public cares. The majority of the public support it, and that makes the ERG irrelevant. And if they don't support it, it will reflect badly on them. And even Boris's little rebellion has sort of disappeared. I think it's the end of the ERG, frankly. I think we're moving on.
Right. So do you think that the Tories have put their Brexit wars to bed?
They have to. They have to. What we have to do is forget the ERG and figure out how we're going to enrich this wonderful country and stop arguing. The thing that the public hates most is divided parties. And I honestly think that the ERG and my dear old friend Jacob should shut up.
Wow. Well, of course, you know he's a star on GB News as well.
I do, but I've been tweaking his nose lately.
Well, listen, that's as it should be. What about this background, though? I think a few policy breakthroughs, the legislation that's passing through the House of Commons in relation to stopping the boats, there are some commentators who have raised eyebrows about it. Of course, we had the Gary Lineker drama last week. But I think that it seems to be quite popular among many Tory voters, and, of course, the crucial red wall. The economy, I mean, it wasn't spectacular on Wednesday, but we've avoided recession. We may not have recession this year. Germany is in recession. Why isn't Rishi Sunak's momentum being demonstrated in the polls?
It's far too early. People aren't feeling the benefits yet. They're not... They haven't... Their economic worries haven't been dispelled. It will take some time. It will take months. But I think it's all very calming. I think people are impressed by Rishi Sunak. And I include people who are thinking about voting for Keir Starmer. I think he's actually been very effective at kind of drawing Keir Starmer's pathetic little sting, if you can call it a sting, because it is pathetic. I think he will sway a lot of floating voters.
I guess Sunak is not a divisive figure in the way
he's not a divisive figure. A lot of people who swing both ways, as Lawrence Fox was talking about.
Speak for yourself.
Sorry.
It's Friday night. We've all had a drink.
It's Friday night. They like him. I think people do trust him, and they appreciate the fact that he works hard. And he's not sort of flashy, and he does seem to care about the country. He's not embroiled in scandals. I mean, we've had enough of the psychodramas, for heaven's sake. I think it's nice. What I'm getting the kind of feeling people I talk to every day is that it's nice to have kind of grown-ups running the country again. and that this will kind of filter through and the Tories will start doing better in the polls. Unfortunately, we haven't got that long.
No, and many governments suffer badly at local elections, and I think that it's pretty obvious, pretty clear, pretty probable that the Tories will get a kicking in May. Can Rishi Sunak survive that, especially in the context of siren calls for a return of Boris Johnson?
Boris' return not going to happen.
Why not?
Because the party don't want him back. There are only, I have to tweet Jacob says, I think there are only 2 people in Parliament who want him back. He won't try again.
Nadine and Jacob.
Yes, he won't try again. He's too divisive. And also, I know it's Friday night, well, he didn't do a terribly good job. People, I think Tories are delighted to have Sunak. And I'm delighted to have Sunak on the international stage as well. I think he's doing this country proud. I'm not ashamed of him. You know, he's sure-footed. He never makes a mistake. He never blunders like Boris does. And, you know, I think people got sick of all that hail fellow, well-met shambles. Because it was a shambles, and he did not capitalise on Brexit. Once Brexit was done, he hadn't a clue what to do. And I think Rishi Sunak is showing that he has a clue.
You've been critical of Starmer, but Starmer could point to his lead in the polls.
Of course, yes.
If, and it's a big if our political system is becoming more presidential, how does Starmer match up to Sunak? Because that's the battle now, isn't it? It's a choice of 2 men for our next Prime Minister.
I think there's no enthusiasm for Starmer. Can't see that, even among Labour supporters. I think there's more personal enthusiasm for Rishi. OK, let's be superficial, because I was thinking about JFK because it was St Patrick's Day and I've got a great photo of him in a green hat. He won over Nixon largely because he was more presentable, he was good-looking, he was fresh-faced, he was energetic. Starmer is sort of pasty-faced. He's beginning to look old. He even looks slightly unhealthy. I mean, I think Rishi really looks like a man who's, you know, on the fast track.
And what would you say to many of my viewers and listeners who are possibly ex-Labour voters who lent their vote to Boris in 2019, who say, never, Rishi, that snake in the grass is the guy that defenestrated an elected Prime Minister with a huge mandate?
Wait a minute. First of all, Boris defenestrated quite a lot of other politicians, including Theresa May. And secondly, half the cabinet defenestrated Boris. And about 20 ministers. So I think that argument is ridiculous. And in any case, he is the best bet for the pro-Brexit voter.
Has Sunak got long enough to turn this ship around?
Well, this is what I worry about. Let's hope so, because the argument is always the Tories have been in power too long. But we've had so many different prime ministers that, in a way, it doesn't seem as if it's been one consecutive government as it did with Thatcher and then Major, or Blair. So maybe the public will see Sunak as a new government, a sort of fresh government. It's a slim hope at the moment, but it's possible.
Well, we know a week is a long time in politics. It will be a year, won't it? It will be more than a year.
Yes.
What's your best bet? A May poll? October? What do you think?
My feeling is May, but my feeling is also that whatever happens, it's going to be very close. I'd never believe there would be a Labour landslide. Never.
No. Possible hung parliament with the Tories as the largest party, perhaps?
That is increasingly possible. I would actually put a bet on that. I'll do it tomorrow.
Well, there you go. And we'll get you back in a year and a bit, and we'll see whether you get your money. By the way, Jacob's outside in the lobby. He wants to the fabulous Petronella Wyatt. Petronella, thank you for a really interesting conversation. Your reaction, Mark at gbnews.uk. Do the Tories have momentum? Or is Rishi Sunak living in a fool's paradise? Next up, I'll be joined by the former UKIP and Tory MP Douglas Carswell, and asking whether high immigration is a Brexit betrayal. See you in 2.
We We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight. Now, this week, the Chancellor's budget relaxed immigration rules to help construction employers fill certain vacant roles. Net migration to the UK, a prominent issue during the 2016 EU referendum, rose to a record high of over 500,000 in 2022. But Jeremy Hunt said people who voted for Brexit did not vote for no immigration. Is that true? He told the BBC that the public voted for control of migration and argued the back-to-work policies announced on Wednesday in the budget were an important part of delivering our Brexit promise. So is higher immigration a price worth paying for economic growth, or is it a Brexit betrayal? Who better to ask than the co-founder of Vote Leave, former Tory MP and the first and only UKIP Member of Parliament, Douglas Carswell. Hi, Douglas.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. Great to have you back on the show. Of course, you're joining us live from the United States. Is high immigration a price worth paying for economic growth?
I think you should have some level of migration. I wouldn't be in favour of no migration. I am, after all, a migrant here in the United States. You need some level of migration. But the idea that you have to have a high level of migration in order to be prosperous, I would say is simply not true. Actually, what you've had in Britain is very high migration, which has meant that you have had cheap labour and a low productivity growth. I would say that actually uncontrolled migration has actually been harmful to increases in UK living standards and wage growth. Now, clearly, when Britain voted to leave the European Union, we voted in that famous phrase to take back control. The reality is that under this administration, we haven't really taken back control at all. We're certainly not controlling the tens of thousands of people who get on boats and cross the channel, but nor are we really controlling those who just kind of come to the country and stay on. What we've created is a bureaucratic system that post facto rationalizes the arrival of people in the UK. Now, that is not a controlled system of migration. And for politicians to pretend that they're controlling it, I think just lacks credibility. What we need is a points-based system so we get to decide who comes into the country, not just based on the numbers we want, not just based on the skills we want, but also, I would say, based on questions of cultural compatibility. There are some people from some cultures who would be easier to assimilate and to integrate into Britain and Western society than others. And we need to have this conversation openly and frankly. What we've got at the moment is nothing like that. It's a shambles. The Home Office isn't in charge, and it's a broken system.
However, isn't there some irony that if we were to accept those who shared our values and our culture, it would be Europeans to whom we've closed the door?
Not necessarily. I mean, here in the United States, you get people from all kinds of backgrounds who become very successful American citizens. I'm actually struck by the number of incredibly successful Americans of Indian heritage, and I know there are many Britons of Indian heritage who've become phenomenally successful. So I take issue with this idea that it's about being European. I would argue that actually, if you were someone brought up in the French tradition of dirigiste government and with a belief in an excessive belief in political rationalism, you were perhaps slightly harder to integrate into the Anglo-American political tradition than someone who perhaps shared a more classical liberal approach. It's nothing really to do with the color of someone's skin. It's to do with whether they come from a culture and a background and a willingness to integrate and to be part of. In America, they call it the American dream. In Britain, there's something similar that we need. This sense that, to come to Britain, to become British and to be British and to be part of something bigger than you. That's what's needed, and that's what's lacking.
And you're so right to talk about Brits of Indian heritage contributing so much to this country and being successful, including our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, no less.
Indeed.
Do you think, Douglas, do you think that Rishi Sunak is serious about getting on top of illegal migration and getting those numbers to a manageable level?
I'll be honest. The Conservative government has been in power for, 13, 14 years. They've had a parliamentary majority for most of that time. An election is coming, and we hear that it's definitely going to be done this time. Well, OK, guys, why haven't you done it? What's stopping you? I mean, the fundamental truth is we have a Home Office that doesn't want to reduce the number of people coming here. And we see protests from staffers working in the Home Office protesting against the minister's own determination to reduce the numbers. So I think there's something fundamentally dysfunctional about the very system of government that is supposed to be in control. Time is running out for this government to effectively, credibly deliver on it ahead of the next election. I slightly struggle to see what it is that they need to do that they haven't already had the opportunity to do.
Given our creaking health infrastructure, lack of school places, of course, we don't have housing either, do we? We're in a housing crisis. It seems perverse to just have immigration in order to boost the economy. Where are these people going to live? How will they get a GP appointment, a school place, all the rest of it? So what is a sensible figure for net migration annually going forward, do you think, Douglas?
I don't know. I rather like the idea that every year Parliament should debate this and set a quota for that year. And if I was in Parliament and I was involved in a debate to cap the total number of people coming into the country, I would want to look very closely at the number of people in the British workforce claiming some form of disability benefit. Some estimates show that there are millions, literally millions of Britons who aren't working because of supposed disability claims. Now, surely if you have a large number of people claiming disability at a time when it's generally understood that the health of the population has improved, I think you need to raise fundamental questions as to whether it's right to import labour if you've got people living in the UK who are unwilling to do those jobs. You perhaps need to tackle the welfare system. Perhaps if you're going to have a welfare system that disincentivizes people from working, you need to address that rather than importing people to come in and do those jobs. Apart from anything, it's slightly morally exploitative, isn't it, to bring in people from poor third world countries to do jobs that you're not willing to do yourself.
Douglas, before we go, the clock's against us. Always illuminating to speak to you on the other side of the pond. What's your appraisal of Rishi Sunak's so-called Brexit breakthrough, the Windsor Framework, which essentially involves red and green lanes for goods coming from mainland Britain into Northern Ireland?
Does it fundamentally change the presumption of the European Court to hold and be the ultimate arbiter of decisions in the United Kingdom? I'm afraid it does. I would therefore be very cautious about supporting it. When it comes to Brexit and the Northern Irish question, the lesson of the May government is that people should never be afraid of saying no to what's on offer if it forces the government to go back and get a better deal. I would be very sceptical about approving this if I was in the House of Commons.
Douglas, great to have you back on the show. We'll speak soon. Douglas Carswell.
Thank you.
The co-founder of Vote former Conservative MP and the only UKIP Member of Parliament in the history of this country. Perhaps never to be repeated. Who knows? After the break, with criticism of lads' mags in the news, should we let boys be boys? And will you be watching the middle-aged Love Island? Would you go on it? All of that to come with the Queen of Clean, Channel 4 star Kim Woodburn. She's next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, it's Friday night. It's St. Patrick's Day, and happy St. Patrick's Day to one and all. And we do like to bring you some good news on Mark Dolan tonight. So not only is a potential deal in the offing with the RMT to end those dreadful rail strikes, a deal with nurses as well. Well, I'm bringing you now news of a developing story that's just in. You'll get more in the bulletin at 9. But it seems that a deal could be in the offing with junior doctors as well, which would mean no further industrial action within the whole of the NHS. So a deal for nurses, a deal for ambulance drivers, and a deal for junior doctors. That is what we're hearing. Of course, these various pay deals will have to be voted on by their respective unions. But it seems the government is making progress in negotiating with various departments within the NHS, the ambulance drivers, the nurses and junior doctors. So there you go. Good news on a Friday. Let me tell you now that a middle-aged version of Love Island is coming. That's probably bad news, let's be honest. But first, the journalist Flick Everett, who wrote for some of the most popular men's magazines in the 1990s, including FHM, has said, "I thought the lads' mags I worked for were harmless fun. Now I fear that they led to a generation of toxic misogynists and women haters." So are men's magazines toxic and dangerous, or a bit of harmless fun? And in this increasingly politically correct world, is it time to let boys be boys? Who better to ask than Channel 4 star Kim Woodburn? Hi, Kim.
Hello, gorgeous. How are you?
Oh, great, and glad to be called gorgeous on my birthday. Kim, what do you think about this? Because there's one argument, which is that these lads' mags are an opportunity for men to have some fun and look at pictures of beautiful women. Others would argue that they cast women as sex objects and are therefore very dangerous.
It's a load of tripe. Look, if a man wants to look at a magazine or a woman, some women read them, you know. There's no harm. You have choices. No one forces you to read or look at anything. And if people want, it's not just men, you know. There are many women look at mucky magazines, dear. Look, it's not harming anybody. They're the right age. Why does it matter? You have choices. You can buy them. If you as a newspaper, something you don't like, then don't buy the newspaper. Boys will be boys, but girls will be girls. Let's just not blame the men.
Do you think that our society, Kim, do you think that our society is getting increasingly hard on men?
Increasingly what, dear?
They're getting hard on men.
Well, I think it is. Look, I'm going to say it. Men haven't changed since the world began. They haven't changed, Lovey. I mean, they are lustful beasts, which I think is wonderful, may I tell you. Now, on a serious note, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. Don't leave a woman out. There are many married couples buy mucky magazines and read them together. Let's stop blaming the men. Please, let's stop doing this.
And what do you think of macho men? What do you think of macho men? Because they seem to be quite criticised these days, that if a guy, I don't know, is a bit of a womanizer and a bit of a drinker, a bit of a playboy, he's described as toxic.
Look, you know my thoughts. If a man is single, because I'm a great one for when you're married, you stay true to your spouse. I'm old-fashioned. If a man is single, let him do what the heck he likes. Let him do what he wants. He's a man, dear. He's a man. What are we trying to do? What's happening to us? You know, we go on about, you know what? A man is, I mean, I love men, my dear, I'm being honest with you. And we women are so down on the men, we've stopped the men being gentlemen anymore. You know, the other day I was out and a young man opened a door for me and I said, thank you so much. He said, you're welcome. It was lovely. We're doing ourselves harm. A man's a man. Would you want him any other way, dear? What do you want, a sissy? What do you want, a sissy? A man's a man. No, come along now. I mean, I don't know. Do you know, I'm frustrated by all this because, you know, women are feminine. Some of the women I've met are like big men, I'm being honest with you. But let a man be a man, let a woman be a woman. And when they get together and make sweet music, oh, it's wonderful, dear. What are we doing to ourselves?
I know. They make sweet music. Spare me the details. It's a family show. Now, Kim, can I ask you whether you would ever pose for one of these lads' mags? You're a beautiful woman. Would you bear all for a few quid?
I've never bared all, I must be honest. I've been asked when I was younger, but I can honestly say I didn't do it. Because in my day, it was, oh God, women didn't flash their whatsits, dear. I mean, you would be regarded as a woman of ill repute. But, I mean, I'm 80, you know, what would I? But now, you know, if you're a young woman, you've got a lovely body or something, you know, why not, my love? Been there, done that. But what's wrong with seeing a woman that's nude or a man that's nude? Come on, we are curious people. I can honestly say this to you. I wouldn't personally go myself and buy a book with nudes in it because I don't feel the need to, I'll be honest with you. But if I did feel the need to, what is wrong with that? I mean, I remember on a shoot once, and I've got to be honest, one of our runners came and said to Aggie and I, you know that man whose house you're doing? We find a right mucky book. I said, oh, go and get it, go and get it. Now, you know, he brought it out, and I said, leave it. And Ag and I were in that trailer. Now, we're not looking for, but we're human beings, lovey. Stop this nonsense. We opened the book. Oh, dear God. I mean, it, you know, and we read the whole flipping book. God, I was sweating buckets, dear. Sweating buckets I was. I'm a human being. And if you will tell me, all you people that pretend you don't, that if you found a book of that content and you were on your own, you wouldn't open it, you're a liar. We're curious. We like looking at bodies. I wouldn't go out of my way. It's in front of me. I'm not going to miss it, dear. I'm a human being. I'm not a robot. Stop being such phonies.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You say that you've never bared all for a magazine. Well, I've got you penciled in for Miss January on the GB News calendar. Nigel Farage is December, Eamon Holmes, February.
Well, how much do you want me to show, dear? How much am I being asked to show?
It's GB News. We want everything. Kim, can I ask you a couple of other things? First of all, you mentioned, I mean, you look amazing for the 8-0. What is your view? What is your view of? Well, that's it. It's all. Look, it's everything. You're a double threat. You've got the brains and you've got the looks to pull it off, Kim. What do you make?
I am a very passionate woman, dear, given the right circumstances.
Or any circumstances.
And I say to myself, you are a gorgeous man and you are very masculine. You're the type of man that makes a woman feel feminine. And if circumstances were different, you and I could have sweet music, dear. No, well, I believe that.
Those circumstances can be made different. Here's the wedding ring. Let me chuck it off right now. I'm going to use a hacksaw. Kim, before you go, we're going to be talking about this.
Your glasses up, dear, by Jove. But don't tell the wife.
Kim, before we go, we're going to be talking.
Nonsense. You know, girls aren't forced to pose, lovely, are they? They're not forced to pose. And
that's Eamon Holmes.
Photos are beautiful. I just watched Love Island with the youngsters, and come on, you know they're there. They've got gorgeous bodies. The boys have all worked out to go on the show. They're lovely boys. And I'm not being funny. But as an older woman, I don't mind looking at a bit of flesh that's lovely. And if you're a woman that says, or a man, oh, it doesn't bother me. Oh, don't be so silly. Come on, we got here through. Oh, please. You know what? I don't want to. It is watershed. But the point is, stop all this nonsense. If you don't want to look at newspapers that have girls half naked, don't buy the newspaper. We've got such choices. If you
That's Nigel
don't want
Farage.
to watch naughty shows on television, then don't put the channel on. There are many more. You are supplied with channels to please everybody. Stop. Well, this is this lady that worked for 5 years. She was a freelance, and she goes on about, she's regretting it now. Do you know, these people make me sick. For 5 years, if I was doing something I didn't want to do, would it take me 5 years to find out? Now, come along. If it's distasteful, it took her 5 years. What a load of nonsense.
There you go. More truth bombs from the Queen of Clean. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I wish I could sip a Guinness with you tonight. We would have so much fun. Big love to your hubby as well, who I know is an ever-present figure, including appearing briefly on the interview earlier in our chat. The wonderful Kim Woodburn, folks. Thank you, Kim. Lots to come. Oh, God, I tell you, that is the ultimate birthday gift. I do hope Mrs. Dolan wasn't watching. I'm in a world of trouble. Don't worry, the ring is still on. So, look, lots to get through. In my big opinion at 9, my first on-air reaction to the budget. The prophets of doom have got it wrong about Brexit, Britain. And at 10 o'clock, in my take at 10, you will not believe this, Oxfam have cancelled the word mother. You can't say the word mother. My reaction after 10. Lots to get through. Clips of the week next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you're just joining us, a developing story, the government could be on the verge of a breakthrough in pay talks with junior doctors. This on top of, on paper, an agreement with nurses and ambulance drivers. And of course, it seems that RMT workers will be voting on a government deal as well. So it's good news all round in terms of potential strike action going forward. However, Annie is not happy. Annie says, Mark, I'm sorry, but nurses will now be more overpaid than ever. Criminal that they get more pay than those who put their lives on the line for us every day. Police, fire and service personnel and others. Annie, thank you for that. On men, are men being demonised just for being men? Aaron says, Mark, Penthouse and other magazines are expensive to the working class. Perhaps a Liberal government could give the working class man a discount voucher. How about that? Sunak versus Starmer. Who wins that presidential contest? How about this from Alan? Mark, interesting listening to your first guest, Petronella Wyatt. In the red wall town of mine, when talk turns to politics, most people do not trust Starmer to run the country. And many thanks to Giles for an important correction. Mark, UKIP had two MPs, Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless, both previously of the Conservative Party. You're absolutely right, Giles, and thank you for correcting me on that. I do believe that Douglas, however, was the only person elected as a UKIP MEP, but I do take your point, and thank you for that. Folks, lots more to get through, but it's time for this. It's time now for Clips of the Week, 7 days of highs and lows on the People's Channel. And we start with State of the Nation with Jacob Rees-Mogg. The country's in turmoil, strikes every day. Disposable income is to drop 6% this year and next. Let's see what Jacob had to say about the state of the nation.
The Marylebone Cricket Club has voted to keep playing the Harrow versus Eton match, a match that dates back to 1805, won more often by Eton than by Harrow, as I'm sure you all wanted to know.
We wanted to know that, absolutely right. And of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg is back on Monday at 8. Now, with the budget highlighting the woes of the nation, I think it's time for a pick-me-up with Esther and Phil, who always lighten the mood.
I mean, look, we've got high taxes, highest tax burden since the Second World War. We've got no growth, pretty much, in the country in the country this year. We've got a decline in living standards. I mean, it's hardly something for a Conservative government to be boasting about, is it?
That was the pick-me-up we all needed. Meanwhile, over on Breakfast with Isabel and Eamon, and Isabel was asking you, the British public, whether you would adopt Eamon Holmes. Who wouldn't?
Graham says, I'd be happy to adopt him on the condition he retires and looks after my garden.
You can go and do one, Graham. No.
Eamon there, not mincing his words as ever. Let's see if Bev and Andrew can save the day with some light-hearted banter. Here they are discussing the current strikes at airports.
I'll tell you what's also interesting. I flew in yesterday from the south of France, which is interesting in its own.
As you do.
I've travelled the world.
I caught a plane from Heathrow in December. Yep. Same to Border Force. They were on strike.
Yep.
The army stepped in. Yep. Brilliant. No delays.
They're shooting themselves in the foot.
Ah, the trials and tribulations of flying in from the south of France. What a nightmare. By the way, could the army not just run Britain? I think it's time. Now, this is not a drill. Michelle Dewberry has made a huge admission live on TV.
Hi, everyone. This is very rare that I admit this, but I was wrong.
Sorry, run that by me again.
Hi, everyone. This is very rare that I admit this, but I was wrong.
Now, apparently, Michelle asked for that clip to be deleted, but it accidentally made it on air. I don't know how that happened. Don't worry, Michelle, it can be destroyed for a small price. OK, after all that, we leave you with the television moment of the year. Here is the highlight reel of the now iconic alternative match of the day, hosted by myself and the brilliant Patrick Christys. Watch it, drink it in. Good evening, it's 10 o'clock, and tonight we make history. This is the alternative match of the day, live on GB News, with me, Mark Dolan, and Patrick Christys. Patrick, go easy on those crisps.
Oh,
Ahead tonight, 60 minutes of the best football reaction and the finest analysis from our top commentary team. Eamon, first of all, we're making TV and radio history. It is the alternative match of the day. Your reaction as a broadcasting legend?
Aye. Well,
Aye. Well, keep at it, lads. Yeah, keep at it. Keep at it.
Yes, well, it does appear now that this thing is working. No, it's not. Good stuff. OK, well, I will tell you, Leicester versus Chelsea. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. Yes, it's back.
The alternative match of the day. I'll see you at the BAFTAs. And those are your clips of the week. Lots more to come. The emails are flooding in. Is high immigration a price worth paying for economic growth? This from Alison. Good evening, Alison. How are you? Hope you're having a cracking Friday night. Alison said, I voted Brexit to have control of our borders, our laws, and to be able to deport people who are a danger to the public. Your guest, Petronella, says Elizabeth, is treacherous, hoisting herself to the usurper. Only people who haven't read the Windsor Framework think that it's a good thing. Remember, the unionists and backbenchers still have to pronounce formally on it. The signals are not good. How about this from Aaron? Mark, the Brexit voters are disappointed with Brexit delivery. The fishermen, the train links cancelled. It looks like the Liberals will make big gains and force a hung parliament. And I think, obviously, when you mention Liberals, it's the Lib Dems. It is Labour. It could be very messy at the next election. I think a hung parliament is now the most likely option, but we'll revisit that, no doubt, in the days ahead. Sorry, says another emailer, I will never vote for Boris, the backstabber Sunak. Betrayal must not be rewarded. I'm still politically homeless. MPs don't want Boris back, but voters do. Anne, sorry, nurses. Oh, we've done that one. We just had Anne there earlier. Oh, and last but not least, this is very, very important indeed. It's from Jackie. Hi, Mark. Glad to see you're wearing green today. Happy St. Patrick's Day and happy birthday. Guinness cake and Guinness all round. Sláinte, says Jackie. Yeah, where is my Guinness? Thank you, Jackie, and a very happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you, each and every one, whether you're watching the show or listening on DAB radio. Coming up next, in my big opinion, following Wednesday's budget, things are tough. But as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. My first on-air reaction to the financial event of the year. It's become a pastime now, a national hobby, to talk this country down. Well, not on my watch. By the way, my take at 10. You won't believe this story. Oxfam, the charity, well, they've banned the word mother. We've got to stand up to this madness or it will never end. That's my take at 10 in an hour's time. You won't want to miss it. We've got my all-star panel, tomorrow's papers and so much more. But next up, it is my big opinion. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight and a very happy St Patrick's Day. My big opinion following Wednesday's budget, things are tough. But as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. I love this country and I won't talk it down. My first on-air reaction to the financial event of the year. Following the Chancellor's childcare announcement, we'll be asking in the big question, should parents be raising their own children rather than sending them to nursery at the age of 1? My Mark Meets guest is military hero, former Black Rod of Parliament, and the man who called out former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow for bullying. Lieutenant General Arundel David Leakey is live at 10 o'clock discussing those allegations about the former Speaker's bullying. A busy 2 hours to come, lots to get through, including my big opinion and the budget. But first, the headlines with the priceless Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against the Russian president. It's accusing Vladimir Putin of war crimes against Ukraine, including the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. The Kremlin has described the claims as outrageous and says it doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Russia must be held accountable.
This is a historic moment in the conflict in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court, which operates independently, has issued an indictment for President Putin and the Children's Commissioner for appalling crimes against children. And whilst they operate independently, it's really important the international community support them and give them the tools to do the job, which is why I'll be hosting on Monday with my Dutch opposite number 40 countries from around the world to give them the support to conduct the investigations, to look after witnesses, to care for the victims so that they can see this through and we hope have accountability for those appalling crimes.
Security guards at Heathrow Airport are to strike for 10 days over Easter in a dispute over pay. Unite Union says over 1,400 of its members at Terminal 5 will walk out from the 31st of March after voting in favour of industrial action. The airport says it has contingency plans in place to deal with the strike, but is urging the union to discuss its proposed 10% pay rise. Junior doctors have agreed to suspend further strike action and enter pay talks with the government. The Health and Social Care Department says the British Medical Association representing junior doctors has agreed to start formal talks. More than 175,000 appointments had to be postponed to protect emergency care during this week's doctor strike. An NHS boss called the three-day walkout unprecedented. The BMA has been demanding a 35% pay increase, which Downing Street says would cost an additional £4 billion. Police Constable Mary Ellen Betley-Smith will keep her job despite being found guilty for attacking a former Aston Villa footballer with a taser and a baton. Former striker Dalian Atkinson died after being kicked at least twice in the head by another officer, Benjamin Monk, who's been jailed for 8 years for manslaughter. Ms Betley-Smith was cleared of assaulting Mr Atkinson after a trial, but the Independent Office for Police Conduct found there was a gross misconduct disciplinary case to answer for her use of force. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have been celebrating St Patrick's Day with the Irish Guards. Kate and William have attended the St Patrick's Day parade in Aldershot. It's Kate's first time at the parade as Colonel of the regiment. The royal couple also met with past members of the Irish Guards. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Thanks, Tatiana. See you at 10. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, and a very happy St Patrick's Day to one and all. My big opinion. Following Wednesday's budget, things are tough. But as we avoid recession, the prophets of doom were wrong to write off Brexit Britain. My first on-air reaction to the financial event of the year. Following the Chancellor's Childcare announcement this week, the big question: should parents be raising children on their own rather than sending them to nursery at the age of 1? My take at 10, the charity Oxfam has banned use of the word mother 2 days before Mother's Day. If we don't push back on this madness, it will only get worse. That's my take at 10. My Mark Meets guest is military hero, former Black Rod of the House of Lords, and the man who accused former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow of alleged bullying, Lieutenant General Arundel David Leakey. The news agenda: as licence fee payers face a £13 price hike, does the Beeb deserve a pay rise? Plus, we'll have tomorrow's papers Saturday, of course, is tomorrow's papers on a Saturday, reacting to those, my fantastic expert commentators, some of the finest in the country. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. Mark at gbnews.uk. This show has a golden rule: we don't do boring. Not on my watch, I just won't have it. So for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. The credibility of certain words has received something of a kicking in recent years. The science, the experts, the modelling. With projections of up to 500,000 COVID deaths, courtesy of Imperial College at the start of the pandemic, COVID modelling was woeful throughout, adding to the government's, in my view, disproportionate response to the virus. Well, financial modelling isn't much better, with the IMF and the Bank of England having to do a wild U-turn in terms of their predictions for the UK economy, in which they claimed, and don't forget these are the terribly wise people, that Britain would be in recession at the end of last year and for the entirety of 2023. How surprising, therefore, that the experts should get it wrong. And whilst Germany is now mired in negative growth, the great United Kingdom, Brexit Britain, dare I say it, ticks over nicely with modest growth. The OECD today are the latest so-called experts predicting a downturn for Britain. Well, let's hope that once again we prove them wrong too. Based upon the track record of financial models whose work is about as reliable as a Nadeem Zahawi tax return, if we play our cards right, with inflation nosediving, with job vacancies high and unemployment low, predicted modest growth could, in fact, be more robust than previously thought. So whilst the outlook is far from sunny, millions of Brits are struggling with the cost of living crisis, high rents, higher mortgages, fuel, gas and electricity are through the roof, and food prices are a shocker. There is unquestionably cause for hope and some optimism. But you won't find that from the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, whose response to the Chancellor's budget on Wednesday was typically negative.
After 13 years of his government, Our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand. A country set on a path of managed decline, falling behind our competitors, the sick man of Europe once again.
He said that with such pleasure. Now, be clear, this government have a lot to answer for, in particular, the disastrous lockdowns, which is why we are here. But it's interesting that Starmer chose to attack this government by attacking the country. His comments on Wednesday reflect the world view of the champagne-swilling North London metropolitan media and political elite. Their view of the world and of this country is that Britain is now a crap place, that Brexit was a national act of self-harm, and that our history is shameful and we should anticipate nothing more than decades of managed decline. Well, I'm sorry, I beg to differ. To be fair, this budget was not one to set your heart racing. Perhaps that was the point. The bookish, administerial Jeremy Hunt is no firebrand, but he has put a few fires out, including settling the nerves of the international markets upon whose largesse we are now so reliant. I see this year's budget as the quiet before the storm. A year from now, with rock-bottom inflation, with momentum in the economy, with growth, it's my view that Hunt will go from zero to hero, with a flurry of tax cuts and growth measures that Liz Truss boldly tried to do this year, but due to poor timing and execution was unable. Trussonomics is coming, just not yet, but it will be worth the wait. My vision of this country is one of low tax, high growth, in which it pays to work and in which lean, efficient public services work, at times in tandem with the private sector, to deliver taxpayers value for money and a better service. And the way I see Brexit is a simple one. It's had a tough start. But like the ugly duckling from the children's stories, I believe it will get more attractive by the day, and it will ultimately age better than Sophia Loren. An independent, sovereign Britain can tackle illegal migration, indulge in lucrative international trade, and pursue economic policies exclusively in the national interest. Now, I do have a spanner in the works. Banks are closing down in the States, and it will be a bumpy year. If America's banking sector falls over, there will likely be another global recession, some form of credit crunch too, and all bets are off. But the fundamentals of the British economy are such that we will get through anything, as we have proven to the financial modelers who got it so wrong. There is now a cabal of commentators attached to the idea that Britain is a failure and who seem to want us to go down. Bashing Britain has become a national pastime among the political and media class. Well, forgive me if I don't indulge. This is a great country, and in spite of the naysayers, it's pretty clear to me that our best is yet to come. With a fair wind and a splash of good fortune, Brexit Britain will prove the lot of them wrong. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your emails shortly. Reacting to my big opinion, we have author and broadcaster Peter Lloyd, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Kulveer Ranger, and journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov. Nina, welcome back to the show. Your reaction to Wednesday's budget, the modelers got it wrong.
No, I don't think so. You talked about Jeremy Hunt putting out the fires, and these are fires that have been started by his own party. And when you say Keir Starmer is attacking Great Britain, he is not attacking the country or the people per se. He is attacking the country as ruled by after 13 years of Tory government. You know, you talk about champagne-swilling lefty lawyers, whatever, but, you know, he is a smart man and he has very important ideas for this country. And you can't say that you can't possibly say that this government or the Tories have they have brought us to this point in time where we're kind of clinging on, basically. It's you know, we're in a terrible state. And the OECD puts us, just Russia are below us in the 20 in terms of finance, and they are, under the stress of sanctions. So it's not just Keir Starmer saying Britain is in a powerless state. We have to recognise that Britain isn't a desperate state. And there's no way around that. You can't be Pollyanna.
Except, Nina, that the modellers, the experts at the IMF, the Bank of England, they all predicted a recession for the whole of this year, and they said we were likely in recession at the end of last year. Neither has come to pass, the so-called experts.
Well, this close to it. We are just this close to it. So, and what's in a name? We're talking about language later. Recession or not recession. I think if you ask most people in this country whether we're in a recession or not, they wouldn't care. They just know that they are desperately trying to pay their bills, pay their electricity bills. Just cling on.
Well, Nina, you're right. My viewers and listeners are struggling. But Germany is in negative growth at the moment. They are likely in recession. They're definitely in negative growth as we speak. Is that because of Brexit that Germany's in trouble?
No, of course not. That's nothing to do with Brexit. And I'm not the one who's mentioned Brexit. I'm not the one who's mentioned Brexit at all. Germany has its own problems, caused by, and I'm no financial expert, but caused by their devotion to Russian gas and oil. So that left them vulnerable in that area. You can't say just because Germany is doing badly that we're doing better by comparison. Therefore, that we're doing really well. We are, as I said, we are just kind of clinging on by our finger. And it's wonderful to be optimistic, but there's no point in being Pollyanna-ish about it.
Corvia Ranger, I mentioned Brexit because it's all part of the narrative of Britain bashing. I find that these organisations like the IMF, arguably the leader of the opposition, most of the media, they're furious that we had the temerity to leave the European Union, and they're just so happy to see any negative economic news about the country. And when they get it wrong, they don't fess up. The bottom line is they said we'd be in recession for the whole of this year. Now they've done a U-turn, the so-called experts.
Yeah, they never really hold on to their forecasts, do they? Because their forecasts keep changing. And they never really look at saying, OK, we got it wrong, but here is what's happened and why it's happened. What we have to look at is the politics and the weather. And what Sir Keir Starmer is doing is trying to create a storm. He's trying to create the misery that will lead to the general election. And we're going to continue to hear that from the leader of the opposition, which might be his job to win an election. But if that means talking down Britain, as you say, Mark, at a time when actually things, I hate to disagree with Nina, but I think we probably will, on a lot of things, especially that this country is not clinging on. If you look at Spain, if you look at France, if you look at Italy, if you look at Germany, these economies are struggling, their financial systems are struggling, their political environments are fragmenting, even worse than what we could say is bad here.
Their growth inflation is less than ours.
No, it's marginal in terms of growth and inflation, but actually what we are looking at is a much more stable economy that has come back from the hits that they got from the COVID outbreak, also from the war, and we are developing and continuing to have growth, and we'll see that coming through. Now, I think that doesn't...
That was caused last year was by the woman that Mark mentioned, Liz Truss. That was a self-inflicted wound. It really was.
Yes, I'd agree, and I think most people would, as Mark said, that there was execution issues and challenge there. But the idea that growth is required, which was what Trussonomics was built on, is absolutely sound. Now, that Prime Minister, she may have gone about it, she did go about it the wrong way, but our political system, and kudos to it, enabled us to change the leader, change the Prime Minister to get what this country needs. And I think we should show that.
We had Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss. We've had,
but Boris Johnson got us through the COVID crisis. He got us through Ukraine. He got us. These are internationally recognised achievements by a Prime Minister.
It's absolutely ridiculous to keep banging on about the vaccine and COVID and Boris Johnson
and Ukraine.
Boris Johnson sees himself as Winston Churchill, and only he could see that the Ukraine war was a political move for him. Really, honestly, let's face it.
I would hate to say it's
karaoke Churchill.
Well, you may say that, but I think the international community, the people of Ukraine, and the coalition that have come together to fight the war in Ukraine would not see it that way. They would say and recognise the work that the Prime Minister did, and also the work that was done to help save millions of people through COVID.
OK, Peter Lloyd, Keir Starmer could argue that he's ahead of the polls. He's streets ahead of the Tories in the polls at the moment, and therefore Britain is in a bad place, and he'll be our next Prime Minister.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? And he would like to think that. And, of course, there is a chance that that might happen. The Conservative Party is certainly on the back foot, through no fault of their own. But let's not pretend...
I would argue with that.
Let's not pretend that the Labour Party are good with a budget. They are the party from which Liam Byrne, I think he was he Chief Secretary to the Treasury? He wrote an infamous letter saying to the Conservatives who were new in power, good luck, there's nothing left, we've spent every penny.
And how long ago was that?
Well, it was relatively recently.
No,
it was within 20 years.
Within 20 years. The Tories have had 13 years to get it right. And they are the ones who have crashed us down and down and down and down. They are the reason we are here now. You cannot blame Labour for that. Yeah, but you cannot blame Liam Byrne for it. You know, for heaven's sake, you know, that's pure desperation.
Well, not really, because if you look at Labour's performance in the 70s, I mean, the country was held to ransom by strikes.
But look,
there were energy blackouts.
That's decades ago. You can't say because there were strikes in the 70s that Keir Starmer is going to lead this country into some kind of financial disaster.
Well, I think he can. I think it is pathological of Labour to not handle a budget correctly.
I will support Peter on this because Keir Starmer also supported Jeremy Corbyn on his budgetary plans and his view of how to spend their way out of to spend hundreds of millions. This was before COVID on various things, and their budgets just did not make sense. It was not sound. And so Keir Starmer was rock solid behind those ideas of tax and spend.
Well, because he's a politician, he knew that the only way he could change the party was from the inside, not from the outside. So he had to be on the inside before he could do something about Corbyn.
This debate
he has negated Corbyn. This debate, the left is actually under, well under Keir's thumb at the moment. So he dealt with anti-Semitism. So in only 3 years he has turned that party around. I don't vote Labour, but you have to be objective and acknowledge what he's achieved.
There you go. This debate will rage on. My panel are back for the papers at 10:30. But next up in the big question, given the Chancellor has announced a load more childcare for parents of 1- and 2-year-olds, should parents be raising the children on their own? Is nursery, is a childminder really the best way to do it? We'll discuss that next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
In just 40 minutes' time, it's my take at 10, reacting to the most extraordinary story possibly of the year. Oxfam have banned the word mother. My reaction at 10. It's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And tonight, Jeremy Hunt used Wednesday's budget to announce an expansion of free childcare to cover 1- and 2-year-olds in England. Parents of children aged 1 and 2 will be able to access 30 hours a week of free care under a policy estimated to cost £4 billion. The Chancellor is also set to increase funding for the existing programme of free childcare for 3-year-olds. So it begs the question, should parents be raising their own children? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome nanny and TV personality Laura Amis and Andrea Williams, CEO of Christian Concern. Great to have you both on the show. Laura, let me start with you. Shouldn't parents be raising their own kids, especially 1-year-olds?
Listen, even as a professional childcare provider, I have to say there is no better person to raise a child than their own parent. However, we are, and nurseries and childminders, all childcare providers are a fabulous backup option.
A backup, but it won't be a backup, will it? It will be the go-to option with 30 hours of free childcare, Laura. Listen, I've got no doubt you and your colleagues do an amazing job, and those kids are lucky to have you in their lives. But do you have concern for our society if very small children are being looked after by people that aren't their parents?
I have lots of concerns, to be honest, for our future society when it comes to the way that children are raised. If the children are receiving good quality care, then no, I don't. I think in any environment, even if it is a parent, forgive me to say, who's caring for a child, there are ways and there are approaches that aren't necessarily as effective as others. So in some instances, being within a professional setting could actually be very helpful for a child.
OK. Andrea, great to have you back on the show. Andrea Williams, CEO of Christian Concern. Your reaction to what is effectively the normalisation of childcare for the under-2s?
Well, it's great to hear Laura there. She has been very positive about, indeed, the role of parents. And of course, no doubt, and it's absolutely clear that what she promotes is really excellent childcare. But there can be no doubt that the real value to a child is being loved and nurtured by their mum, by their dad at home in those early years, and that to create a culture whereby that is continually outsourced to others as the go-to, as the norm, cannot really be beneficial for society, certainly but not beneficial for those little children. I'm a mum of 4, they're now well grown, but it was wonderful to have the opportunity to stay at home and to be with them. I mean, I also had some wonderful nursery care, it has to be said, absolutely wonderful nursery care. But Laura has made this point, hasn't she, that good quality care is great, but there's also quite a lot out there that isn't necessarily as great as it might be. And creating this overwhelming need and incentivising it, rather than encouraging mums to consider how to stay at home and to stay at home wherever possible, is actually a very sad move by the government.
Well, Andrea, this policy will cost the government anywhere from £300 to £400 a week per child. Many families, Andrea, would argue, look, give us the money, and it means that either mum or dad can stay at home and raise the baby.
Well, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it, to actually think differently about where the money is going. At the moment, parents are compelled almost to consider going back to work, the mum to consider particularly going back to work, because the tax rate on wages is so very high. So what they actually see as net income is small compared to what they might be earning. Well, let's think about that differently. Let's actually put more money into the family. Let's reduce the tax burden so that the mum might be able to stay at home. Of course, sometimes the dad, but it's more usually the mum might be able to stay at home. It would be amazing to see the tax breaks coming to the family. And there are countries, France, for instance, that gives real tax breaks to the families to incentivize parents to stay at home. In Hungary, we've seen similar schemes. Affordable housing, for instance, even affordable vehicles is something that Hungary encourages. And I think that that's the kind of way that we need to go. If we tax so hard from the wage packet, then we force two parents to have to go into the marketplace, when in fact we ought to be giving the tax breaks to those that are raising small children at the time so that they can stay at home. I mean, because it is an absolutely wonderful privilege to be at home with little children and to raise them up. And when you're a mum, those moments, I remember when I was overwhelmed when my first child was born, but I was very much enjoying my life as a lawyer, and couldn't imagine even being at home with a mum. And then I met Lily, and that was it. And I really so loved that time being with her and raising her and the three children that followed.
Well, lovely, lucky kids that they are. I wonder whether it is about the economy. This is about money, Laura, rather than the welfare of children and families. How about this quote from the journalist Alison Pearson, who tweeted this week, again and again, mothers tell pollsters what they'd like is to spend more time with their small children. This basic instinct is overridden by politicians who just see women as cash cows, not vital nurturers of the next generation.
Yeah, again, I think I'm going to have a whole heap of my colleagues kind of saying, Laura, you're doing us a disservice here. But I do agree. I do feel that there is no better person to care for their child, especially in the formative years, in those very early years, than their parent. And I am somebody that has taken a tiny baby from a parent's arms and cared for them with love. I'm very, I love my job. I'm very good at my job. I can say that. But if those little babies are being put into an environment that isn't, as loving or as nurturing, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit, I wouldn't say an issue for them, because we don't know. We don't know what will happen throughout their development. But where should they be? In their mother's or father's arms?
Yeah, I mean, Laura, listen, I'm going to get you out of trouble with your entire industry. Because I think that, you're both rightly concerned about these small children being looked after in nurseries. But, I mean, most nurseries do an amazing job. They are very caring. They are very loving.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you that when my eldest went to nursery, and it was just a few hours a week at first, but actually it transformed his personality. He became more independent, more outgoing, more sociable. He was stimulated. And actually, in many cases, the kids have a more stimulating time in nursery than they would at home when mum or dad is actually on the laptop sending emails and nursing a coffee rather than really doing anything.
Yeah, that brings me back to the point I made earlier about it really depends on the environment, because you can be at home with your parent who adores you more than anybody on the planet, but it's not necessarily going to be a very stimulating or rewarding environment where they are learning all the skills that we then need to become, an effective member of society. It's so dependent on the circumstance. And there may even be instances where parents don't necessarily have to go out to work, but actually they require that break, because there's nothing more challenging than being with children all day, every day. So in some instances, it's not even necessarily about the money. I'm sorry to kind of go off on a tangent. It is about the fact that parents, they need help. You know, they need the village. So
Laura,
there's so many different...
Laura,
sorry, go on.
I've got to run. I totally agree with you. Listen, I need a bit of childcare for my eldest tomorrow night. He's 17. Do you think you could do a couple of hours? He's an absolute
I'm busy,
nightmare.
sorry.
He's still teething. Thank you so much, Laura Amis, nanny and TV personality, and Andrea Williams, CEO of Christian Concern. What do you think? Should parents be raising their own children? Coming up next, is a top Tory peer right to suggest jobless Brits should move to the country to pick vegetables? That's next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Reacting to the big stories of the day, author and broadcaster Peter Lloyd, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Kulveer Ranger, and journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov. Now, a Conservative peer has suggested the unemployed should be transported to the countryside to help with the labour shortage. Baroness Buscombe said several million people who could work should be encouraged to find jobs in areas such as Hertfordshire, where there are not enough pickers. The National Farmers Union leader, Minette Batters, has supported the idea. So what do we think? Peter Lloyd, what do you think? It sounds a bit medieval to me.
Yeah, initially I thought this is ludicrous. What is she going on about? But actually, the more I thought about it, the more I thought maybe there is some merit to the idea. It's certainly very hipster, the idea of getting someone to go and forage, you know, for their dinner somewhere. I mean, would probably be a 5-star hotel in East London somewhere. But I don't know, I think it could be quite good. But who would trust a government or anyone in this country to implement it? I mean, really, how would they ever execute that plan?
This is a very provocative suggestion from the Baroness, but I wonder whether it raises the wider debate about 2.5 million working-age adults who are currently not active in the economy.
Right.
I think 800,000 under-21s are out of work at the moment as well.
Yeah, I actually think it's fine to expect more from unemployed people. Just because they're unemployed doesn't mean they have to be inactive. They can still be contributing to the economy or to the workforce in some way, even if it's unpaid. So I think that's entirely reasonable.
However, this sounds like a policy of the Chinese Communist Party, doesn't it? I can't see it happening in Britain anytime soon. Busing jobless people to the countryside to, you know, dig for parsnips.
Yes, it's a bit carry-on farming, isn't it? But I don't think that's really how it should be portrayed. And, you know, maybe let's try and rebrand this somewhat, because what we are looking at is saying match the need with where the people are. And there's definitely maybe a grain of opportunity here where we could see students in the summer, you know, maybe not spending as much time on gaming and various other things, being taken, encouraged by supermarkets who need people, by farmers, and the NFU are very keen on this. It's about how do we excite people to do this. You know, organic, we pay over the odds to get organic food straight from the fields. Here we've got plenty of it, plenty of fields to be done. Let's get people out there, let's get them excited, let's get Britain working, which is what the Chancellor has been saying. And I think there is a smidgen about this, but you're right about it being a bit, you know, Chinese, if there's a case of it's a government policy. Maybe there is something that supermarkets and farmers can do.
If somebody has a disability or they're long-term sick, you know, that's, for me, what the welfare state is for.
Yeah.
But is it not a scandal that there are over 1 million job vacancies in this country?
Well, there are also long-term ill. So we look at that. But,
Although, as Douglas Carswell raised a question earlier, how ill?
Well, it's all right for him to say he's fit and presumably and fit for work. But what about long COVID? You know, there are over 1 million. I think it's 2 million people have long COVID, and that includes fatigue. You can't go and pick anything in a field if you're.
Well, then we're done for, aren't we?
Well, I don't know. The thing is, the idea of these, you know, surly teenagers being bussed from, you know, from you know, they want to be.
You met my son.
You know, to pick turnips in a field. I don't think it's going to work because they don't want to do it anyway. If they could make money doing it, they would do it. But then they don't want to do it.
My only caveat is if we're going to bust the unemployed there, we should also include some lazy lords as well. I think that would be good.
Not a bad shout. Normally they just clock on for 5 minutes to get their 300 quid, don't they? Thousands of people in France have been protesting after President Emmanuel Macron raised the retirement age from 62 to 64. He bypassed Parliament after failing to convince MPs to vote through his plan. As the French take to the streets to protest against this pension reform, are Brits too compliant? What do we think about that? Kulveer?
Well, we've had our own set of strikes, whether it be junior doctors, on the underground in London, and civil servants this week. So I don't think we're too compliant.
But this is civil disobedience, isn't it?
This is strikes. There's strikes, and I've got friends in Paris. I work with a number of colleagues there. They've been complaining about the smell of rotten food in the streets of Paris because the bin men are on strike in Paris, and this is really causing
And they've
an
had
issue.
arrests.
Yes, so the French are getting their message across, but that didn't stop Nicolas Sarkozy increasing the pension age from 60 to 62. And I don't think it'll stop President Macron, because also if you look at the figures here, and there's a fundamental issue about modern economies and the challenge they're facing with an ageing population and the ability to sustain pensions for them. We have it in this country. We have that challenge. France is facing it. Other mature economies, Western economies, are facing it too.
They pay more in France than any other country in Europe.
Well, there you go. A bit of a Boris Johnson move, by the way, to ignore Parliament, wasn't it?
Well, you know, sometimes there are things that have to be done. And I remember proroguing Parliament was seen as, you know, quite challenging at the time, but the French are now doing it.
There you go.
Cheated the Queen.
Who knew? 16-year-old Finlay Hutchings of Gloucestershire has been revealed as one of Britain's youngest shopkeepers, despite leaving school without any qualifications. He told the Daily Mail that opening the shop meant leaving school with no GCSEs, but he has no regrets about dropping out. So, are exams overrated? Nina Mishkov.
Well, exams aren't overrated. We need to have a system where people work towards a goal and achieve a goal, and people know how they've done. But you don't have to have an exam a string of exam qualifications to succeed. Look at Richard Branson. Richard Branson is a prime example, but there are very few Richard Bransons and real entrepreneurs.
Lord Sugar?
Well, Lord Sugar, yes. There are people like that who have drive and determination and persistence and a work ethic, and on they go, which is absolutely fine. But this guy hasn't just done it on his own. I mean, I'm reading this story. He said he learnt the art of shopkeeper from his father, Mark, and as a child he helped his dad with his own business and even assisted him with buying and selling at auctions. So he's grown up in the family business. So that he's not like he's not got money behind him,
Sure.
and he has learned,
and ongoing education from
absolutely from his father. So he has an advantage. But good on him. I mean, you don't have to have a string of letters after your name.
Well, I just wonder whether we've gone to the other extreme, Peter Lloyd, which is under Tony Blair, Labour's plan of getting more than half of school leavers into university, when perhaps getting into the world of work would have benefited many.
Right, exactly. I actually love this move against education. I think education is, in many ways, corrupt. Academia is often corrupt, certainly the humanities department.
What do you mean by corrupt?
Infiltrated by political activists who pose as teachers or professors. And they...
I think that's a bit extreme.
Well...
I think that's a bit, away with the fairies, to be quite honest.
I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of evidence.
What kind of stuff's being taught, do you think, in the worst-case scenario?
Well, kind of like warmed-up Marxism for the most part. But, I would say that a move away from academia is probably a good thing, really. I would encourage young people, especially young men, go into engineering, go into tech, go into small business. Yeah, I mean, plumbing. And all manual work, that's incredibly lucrative. Go for it.
I would just add that I come from a community that came here, and some of them didn't have the opportunity to have the education. They had to go straight into work and have been hugely successful. So there's everything for you if you go into entrepreneurialism, start a business, do things. I think sometimes education is foisted upon people when maybe this opportunity of being a businessman or being entrepreneurial can be there for you. But I don't think it's for everyone. And I think we should let people take their choices and have the choice to do either business, start up their own. This young guy, Philly's been hugely successful. What, for every one of him, there's probably a few people who probably want to go carry on doing the GCSEs.
He says, I can read, write and count money, which is all I need. No, but actually, if all the primary school children could leave when they could read, write and count when they left primary school and went into higher education, then we'd have a country that was worth fighting for.
That would be a start, wouldn't it? Well, look, coming up, the BBC licence fee is rumoured to be going up by £13 a year. After weeks of rows over impartiality, we're going to debate the future of the BBC and the licence fee. Should it go up? Is it time for the Beeb to have a pay rise? We'll debate that with former BBC executive David Leakey and the BBC's former chief political correspondent John Sargent. They're next.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
A big reaction to all of our debates on email. This in regard to the idea of working class unemployed people being shipped to the countryside to dig for vegetables. The vile Tories want to make the sick work as slaves. Neil, not happy with this suggested policy. I'll get to more of your emails shortly. But let's talk now about the BBC, the national state broadcaster. And a fascinating story. There is growing speculation that the BEEB licence fee could increase by £13 next year. The charge of £159 could rise to £172, which would amount to the biggest increase in more than 20 years. The licence fee is due to rise in line with inflation in April 2024 after a 2-year freeze. Yesterday, Nadine Dorries, the Tory MP who as Culture Secretary signed off the freeze, called for no further increases until changes to BBC funding are considered. So, with the cost of their radio and television operations rising, is it time to give the state broadcaster a pay rise, or should they cut their cloth accordingly? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome the BBC's former chief political correspondent from 1992 to 2000, broadcaster and best-selling author John Sargent, and former BBC executive and founder of Newswatch, David Keithley. David, welcome to the show. Is it time to give the BBC a pay rise?
Good evening. No, I don't think it is, because I don't think that the events with Gary Lineker and over impartiality generally show that the BBC hasn't got its act in order. They have stuck resolutely to the idea that they should be funded by the licence fee when the broadcast environment is changing massively. And in that sense, they are asking for trouble, because people are asking the question against this lack of impartiality and various falling viewing figures, etc. They're asking the question of whether they want to pay the licence fee. Evasion's up to 10%, and at the same time, nearly 2,000 people a week are being fined for non-payment. It's a very difficult situation.
However, John Sargent, is this fair on the BBC? It's watched and listened to by millions.
That's right. More than 90% of the population listen and watch the BBC every week. The idea that you can introduce quick changes or that you can bleed the BBC to death by 1,000 cuts, you've got to be very careful with this. It's a very elaborate balance between making sure that enough people pay and there's enough money to make sure that it's not too expensive. Now, you may think £159 a year is a lot of money, but actually it's only about 40 pence a day. And if you change that system, it's going to end up, if you're not very careful, you say, oh, why can't it be like Netflix, or why can't it be like other things? You may find the subscription, if it is a subscription, is much more than 40 pence a day. So whatever you do, you've got to do with great care. And it's interesting that although the government have said we're going to review the licence fee, and they promised to do that a year ago, what's actually happened is that they still think this is a very tricky issue. And remember, there is an election next year. If they're going to change the BBC finance system, it'll have to be in the manifesto.
However, David Keithley, you look at podcasts now. I mean, the most downloaded and listened to podcast in the world is the Joe Rogan podcast. This is a guy that essentially hosts a show in his garage. He's got one producer and 11 million listeners a week. The BBC ought to cut its cloth, don't you think? Particularly given that other broadcasters, dare I say it, including GB News, do just that.
Exactly. And that's my point about the broadcasting environment changing rapidly. And to answer what John Sargent said, I'm not talking about bleeding the BBC to death by 1,000 cuts. They're very lavishly funded at the moment with income of over £3.5 billion a year. What's necessary here is in the midterm review that the DCMS is releasing in May, that work on that is underway. And Nadine Dorries was Culture Secretary when that process was set in chain. What they need to be doing is looking at the issue very carefully and looking at how they can maintain the good points of the BBC while at the same time reforming it to meet the requirements of the new broadcasting environment, and at a cost that people can afford. £159 to £173 a year, £172 a year is a huge increase for people on very low incomes. John might talk about only 40 pence per day, but if you're a single mother, and most of the people who are fined for non-payment of fines are in that category, that is a lot of money. And that should be taken into account when there are alternative means of broadcasting these days.
John, you were at the BBC.
Yeah, David,
go on, John, go on.
No, I'm just saying, David says all this as if there's a new system you can bring in. What do you actually want to do, David? Are you trying to cut the BBC down to size? Is that what you're after? And think that the BBC should be smaller, should be less active in all these areas? In which case, what are you going to cut? What don't you like? Don't you like the orchestras? Don't you like the proms? Don't you like David Attenborough? Don't you like the news coverage? You know, where do you start saying, oh, they could save lots of money and they could work in a garage and have...
Oh, now, poor John's just been cut off. He obviously not paid his electricity bill. We've lost the line, but can I thank John Sargent for a great contribution, and also David Keithley, who is a former BBC executive and founder of Newswatch. David, listen, what is a good amount for the BBC to be charging the great British public? You mentioned the income is about £3.5 billion. Could they do it on a fraction of that? How much do you think the licence fee should be?
I think it would take greater minds than mine to come up with the precise answer to that. I think what the BBC need to do is to take a long, hard look, and this in association with consultation with the audience, about what services that people are genuinely enjoying, what services are genuinely vital in the current broadcasting environment. And I think also what the BBC need to do, which is, I think, a terribly important part of the equation, is starting to respond better to their audience. At the moment, the interface, for example, through the complaint system, is that the vast majority of complaints that are received by the BBC are rejected by the BBC as judge and jury.
Okay.
And I think a way of opening up the BBC would be to include more consultation on such issues.
OK, well, just like the we run to time. Gentlemen, a fascinating conversation. John, I wish we could speak more, but we'll catch up with you on a future occasion. My thanks to John Sargent there and David Keithley. The people have spoken. On Twitter, we asked, does the BBC deserve a pay rise? More than 67% said no, 33% said yes. Next up, in My Take at 10, they want to ban the word mother. That's next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. Happy St Patrick's Day to one and all. In my take at 10 in just a moment, as Oxfam seeks to cancel the word mother, the charity is asking for a fight. And my Mark Meets guest is military veteran and former Black Rod of Parliament, Lieutenant General David Leakey. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. But I'll be dealing with that Oxfam story next. They've tried to ban the word mother. And by the way, it's Mother's Day on Sunday. We'll discuss that next after the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The UK has welcomed the International Criminal Court's decision to issue an arrest warrant against the Russian president. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says it's essential to hold Moscow to account. The ICC is accusing Vladimir Putin of war crimes, including the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia. The Kremlin has described the claims as outrageous and says it doesn't recognise the jurisdiction of the ICC. Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab says Russia must be held to account.
This is a historic moment in the conflict in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court, which operates independently, has issued an indictment for President Putin and the Children's Commissioner for appalling crimes against children. And whilst they operate independently, it's really important the international community support them and give them the tools to do the job, which is why I'll be hosting on Monday with my Dutch opposite number 40 countries from around the world to give them the support to conduct the investigations, to look after witnesses, to care for the victims so that they can see this through and we hope have accountability for those appalling crimes.
Security guards at Heathrow Airport are to strike for 10 days over Easter in a dispute over pay. Unite Union says over 1,400 of its members at Terminal 5 will walk out from the 31st of March after voting in favour of industrial action. The airport says it has contingency plans in place to deal with the strike, but is urging the union to discuss its proposed 10% pay increase. Junior doctors have agreed to suspend further strike action and enter pay talks with the government. The Health and Social Care Department says the British Medical Association, representing junior doctors, has agreed to start formal talks. More than 175,000 appointments had to be postponed to protect emergency care during this week's doctor strike. An NHS boss called the three-day walkout unprecedented. The BMA has been demanding a 35% pay rise, which Downing Street says would cost an additional £4 billion. Police Constable Mary Ellen Betley-Smith will keep her job despite being found guilty for attacking a former Aston Villa football player with a taser and a baton. Former striker Dalian Atkinson died after being kicked at least twice in the head by another officer, Benjamin Monk, who's been jailed for 8 years for manslaughter. Ms Betley-Smith was cleared of assaulting Mr Atkinson after a trial, but the Independent Office for Police Conduct found there was a gross misconduct disciplinary case to answer for her use of force. And the Prince and Princess of Wales have been celebrating St Patrick's Day with the Irish Guards. Kate and William have attended the St Patrick's Day parade in Aldershot. It's Kate's first time at the parade as Colonel of the regiment. The royal couple also met with past members of the Irish Guards. TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Tatiana, resplendent in green, as am I. Well, resplendent is a big word when I'm concerned, but happy St Patrick's Day to one and all, and many thanks for the birthday wishes as well. Now, on Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is the renowned military veteran, former usher of the Black Rod in the House of Lords, and the man who called out former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow over alleged bullying. Lieutenant General David Leakey is live in just a few minutes. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 with full panel reaction. But first, this. The charity Oxfam, the organisation famous for its shops on the high street selling bags of unwanted rubbish, are now talking unwanted rubbish as they reveal in their own literature and guides that the word mother, that's right, the word mother should not be used as it's not inclusive. What a bunch of mothers. Fathers are also for the chop, of course they are. Blimey, with this politically motivated assault on language, just what will we be calling these human beings that give birth to babies in the future? Well, Oxfam have an idea. They're suggesting AFAB and AMAB. Now, AFAB stands for assigned female at birth, and AMAB, assigned male at birth. Are you confused? I know I am. AFAB, AMAB. Well, I can think of an alternative 4 letters that start with F. Look, I'm old enough and ugly enough not to care what you call me. But to rob women of the title mother is the most egregious assault on womankind imaginable. On top of that, to brand biological women the source of all humanity, cis women, is an amazing insult. If you called my own mother a cis woman, she'd give you a slap. And by the way, for Sunday, happy Mother's Day, Mum. Attacking and debasing women with language is now open season, with health services, charities and even corporations describing women as people with cervixes, birthing humans, and chest feeders. If a woman with a child can't be called mother anymore, we're in trouble. All of this comes from so-called gender ideology, which is a philosophy that says men are women and that women are men, and ignores basic biology, and which effectively cancels the female species. This ideology, in my view, is dangerous, it's mad, and it's anti-science. Don't take my word for it. Here is one of the greatest experts on human fertility, Dr. Robert Winston, on Question Time just a few years back.
I say this categorically, that you cannot change your sex. Your sex actually is there in every single cell in the body. You have a chromosomal sex, you have genetic sex, you have hormonal sex, you have all sorts of different kinds of psychological, brain sex, they're all different.
So-called gender ideology at its heart hates women. Why else would it ban the word mother? Why else would it place biological males who identify as female into women's sport? Why would it place biological males who identify as female into women's prisons, women's bathrooms, women's changing rooms, and even into women's rape crisis centres? The world has spun so far off its moral axis that to speak up for women's hard-won rights and their freedoms and safeguarding will now see anyone who challenges this madness viciously attacked. Gender ideology is even bad news for lesbians, whose work I've enjoyed online for many years. This toxic gender ideology is, by definition, incredibly homophobic because it says that if a lesbian is not attracted to a trans woman, in other words, an intact biological male with the full meat and two veg, then she is a bigot, a TERF and a transphobic. Accept the cock, ladies, or you're a bad person. This is progress, is it? You might think this woke madness will blow over, but it won't. We put up with it to make it go away, but by putting up with it, it means it never will. This woke stuff, which millions on the left also hate, may not affect you now, but a hurricane doesn't affect you until it hits your home. Oxfam are trying to cancel women. There's nothing charitable I can say about that. An organisation which claims it's there to help people is now beyond help itself. How many women, you know, the old-fashioned ones with vaginas, will continue to support this woke charity? You tell me. But on this occasion, Oxfam have picked the mother of all fights. It's one they can't win. Mother knows best. If you called my mother a cis woman, she would give you a slap. Now, what do you think? Mark at GBnews.uk. Oxfam will argue they are a global organisation offering practical and moral support to any vulnerable individual. Their focus is to be inclusive so that anyone can benefit from their work. And they would argue that, importantly, trans people aren't part of that because they statistically are some of the most prejudged and attacked members of society. All Oxfam are doing, they would argue, is to make the world a better and safer place for its most vulnerable citizens, whatever their gender, race, orientation or background. Well, I think in losing the word mother, they've lost the plot. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Reacting to my take at 10, author and broadcaster Peter Lloyd, former advisor to Boris Johnson, political commentator Kulveer Ranger, and journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov. Peter, over to you.
Well, this is just very fascinating. I mean, here we have a charity which is supposed to be myopically focused on helping the vulnerable, faffing around with something which is really a symptom of decadence. Why on earth is this organisation wasting time, wasting money, wasting energy, risking public sympathy with some brochure about language usage? It's so incredibly patronising. And the irony is that it was billed as a feminist principle to using language. I mean, how ironic is that? So apparently this is feminist language use, but it erases the word mother and the word father. I mean, it's laughable. And I think, you know, if they are the architects of their own downfall, then unfortunately they deserve it.
Nina, what a bunch of mothers.
Well, the thing is, I'm female. I'm a feminist. I've always stood up for
for women's rights, but I also stand up for transgender rights and for human rights, basically. Human rights are what's important to me. But you can look at this from a different angle. I mean, I know on the surface it seems completely ludicrous, and especially with Mother's Day coming up on Sunday. But there is another aspect to this. Mother's Day is on Sunday, and I've been getting lots of emails from all sorts of companies and supermarkets and Mother's Day products. But they also, in the last few years, have been sending along other emails and saying, if you would find this upsetting, obviously if your mother has died or there is a problem, please let us know, and we won't send you more of these emails. And I'm all for that. I don't have a problem with mothers. But Father's Day, I lost my father when I was 12. And I still have a problem on Father's Day. And, if somebody's sensitive enough to think about that, then fine. What I'm going to point you towards is the fact that in case studies, in dealing with disasters in, say, Africa, earthquakes in Turkey or what have you, if you are talking to a child, they may not have a mother or a father. They may be dead anyway. So to say parent would be a more sensitive thing. Or who is caring for you? Who is looking after you? Rather than saying, where is your mother? Where is your father? That's just an aspect, a sensitive aspect. You might care to think this is part of Oxfam's, without extrapolating it into all other kind of issues. And I'd like to think of it in that way.
All right. I mean, Kulveer, one particular commentator pointed out this could have legal implications given the fact that in emergency circumstances, the mother might not automatically be assigned as the primary carer to the child because the word mother has been erased.
Yes, and I think there is a fundamental problem here. But firstly, let me take the opportunity to wish Happy Mother's Day to my mother, Early, who is tuned in and watching religiously to this show.
She did a great job.
Yes.
You're a very nicely brought up young man.
Thank you, Mark. But to the point, I think Oxfam are having a Gerald Ratner moment here. They are a fundamental global charity that have trust and a huge brand equity that people buy into for the good work that they do. Taking out this issue, I have nothing against transgender rights. I think they should be protected, they should be championed, as Nina says, but not at the detriment of mothers around the world, not at the meaning of, as you said, erasing the word mother. That is not the way to go about this issue. That is saying, well, we'll do some immense self-harm on this massive issue that, the whole world understands the role of a mother and the importance of a mother. Yes, there might be sensitive points when we have to look at how we present the mother figure or reference the mother figure, but there is a mother figure from the dawn of time. And for Oxfam to think that they need to remodel, redesign and erase that terminology, well, I think that's a stretch too far.
OK.
I hope they can sort of find a way through this, but this seems like a challenge.
Are Oxfam right or wrong to discourage the use of mother in their literature and guides? Let me know. mark@gbnews.uk. I'd especially like to hear from mothers, birthing humans. We've got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full panel reactions, some great front pages coming in already. Looking forward to sinking our teeth into the papers at 10:30. But next up, my Mark Meets guest is a military veteran, Parliament's former Black Rod, Lieutenant General David Leakey, who, by the way, is the man that called out former Speaker of the Commons, John Bercow, for his alleged bullying. He's got quite the story, and he's next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your emails shortly, but it's time now for Mark Meets. Tonight, the man who called out former House of Commons Speaker John Bercow's bullying military hero and former Black Rod, Lieutenant General David Leakey. As a former gentleman usher of the Black Rod, David was responsible for the state opening of Parliament, summoning members to Parliament to the House of Lords to hear the Queen's speech, having the Commons door slammed in his face and banging on it with the famous Black Rod, one of the country's most recognised traditions around the world. David was previously a general with a highly distinguished career, commanding multinational forces on NATO and EU operations, including counter-piracy in the Indian Ocean. And he has since enjoyed a succession of top posts in multiple charity and business organisations. I'm delighted to say that David Leakey joins us now. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight, sir.
Evening to you, Mark. I'd like to just point out I'm wearing a green shirt, put on specially for the occasion. It's my favourite shirt. I'm afraid it's a bit tatty, but it's the only green one I've got.
Well, look, it's very fetching, and it's in a good cause to celebrate St Patrick's Day. Happy St Patrick's Day to you. Lieutenant General Arundel David Leakey, CMG, CVO, CBE. What a career. Military bravery is in the family DNA, isn't it? Your father was a Major General and you're related to 2 Victoria Cross winners.
Yes, my father was always known as the coward of the family. He won a DSO and 3 military crosses in the Second World War, but he was trumped by his elder brother, who won a Victoria Cross. And then more recently, my cousin won a Victoria Cross in Afghanistan about 6-7 years ago.
Have there been moments, David, in your career when you feared for your life?
Yes, but we don't talk about them.
Unlike certain members of the royal family, what has your time in the military taught you that could be of use, David, to us civilians who, with any luck, will never see war?
I think the 2 things I would think I would just pick on from my military career. One is respect, and speaks to all the things you were just talking about with your panel earlier. If people have respect for one another, then you get along much better. And people with hate speech don't exhibit respect. People who are in leadership positions who don't treat others with respect are no longer leaders. So respect is a big thing. The second thing I would point out is really understanding risk. And I don't think some of, in the present political climate, while some of our leaders and politicians and senior military and senior civil servants, diplomats, I'm sure they understand the risk, and the think tankers and the people who have a grasp on international affairs and what's going on in the world, in Russia and the China-Taiwan issues that are going on these days, I'm sure they will understand the risk. But I'm afraid that the great majority of ordinary people, and I count myself as one of those now, I'm retired from the military, but the majority of the people I speak to, whether it's in the pub, the local pub, in the shop, the people I work with, they don't really understand the great risks that we are running at the moment, and particularly with the Russia crisis as it's going at the moment. I don't think people realize the fact that we are actually at war. We Brits are not fighting. One or two people have gone to Ukraine to fight, but there is a war going on. It's a war of ideologies between the Russian autocracy and the Western idea of democracy. This is an ideological war that is going on. It's being fought on the ground at huge human cost in Ukraine, and it's being fought in the cyberspace, in the banking world. It's being fought in the economic sanctions world. And we are feeling the effects of it on the ground here with, for example, the shortage of tomatoes on supermarket shelves, to pick a really trivial and frivolous example. But the cost of living crisis, so many things that adversely affect the economic growth of this country, the well-being particularly of those who are worst off in our societies, are a direct, not entirely to blame, but a direct result of the war that's going on there. And if we don't put a stop to that war somehow quickly, then the problem will continue. And people will start to draw the wrong lessons. If Putin wins this war, if he's successful, if the West capitulates, then that will set a bad example for what China might think of doing in Taiwan. And we already see America with some reluctance. The American population itself is, I forget what the exact percentages are, but it's not unanimously in favor or in support of financial and military aid, or military aid to Ukraine. That's in the balance. And if the Republican Party was to win the next American election, presidential election, then that situation might even get worse. And then what lesson would the Chinese take from that if they were to think about taking Taiwan back into the greater China? And what would that mean for escalation? And I think people don't realize the risks. So you asked me two questions. One is respect, really important thing, and the other is understanding risk.
The clock's against us, David. Briefly, if you can this awful war be resolved within the year?
I wish. And I fear it will not be resolved within the year. Because there is effectively stalemate in the conventional fighting on the ground in the east of Ukraine. And everybody around Ukraine, including the Russians themselves, are being quite cautious about not escalating the war with a sudden knee-jerk. And the greatest fear is that if somebody, the Americans, the Germans, the Poles, the EU, NATO, or Putin, the Russians, do something petulant, then there could be a dramatic and irrational response. And that is very dangerous and possible. And I think, therefore, there will be a continuing stalemate, because the stasis is the calmest way to try and bring the war to some sort of conclusion, whether it's a diplomatic one or whether it's eventually an attritional exhaustion by one or both sides.
There you go, David, a sobering assessment of the challenges the West faces in in defeating Vladimir Putin's aggression. You would argue we've all got skin in that game. We all have a stake in Ukraine's victory. Last but not least, former Black Rod. Why is this iconic but eccentric tradition so important?
Goodness me, it really is important. It's televisual. It excites people to switch their televisions on at the state opening of Parliament and look at one of our great traditions, a tradition that goes back 500 years. So, and you know, these traditions that we have in this country are the envy of the world, and for the right reasons. They form the fibres which make up the fabric or the tapestry of our country, of our heritage, of our constitution. And our constitution has been stable for a very, very long time, longer than any other country in Europe, I think I'm right in saying. And these sorts of things, the black roddery, as I call it, the guards who stand outside the royal palaces, the Queen's birthday parade, the state ceremonies that we have, these are some, not all, they're not unique in themselves, but they are some of the landmarks which are the anchor points of our country, our national identity, of the stability of our constitution, our heritage, our institutions, the glue, part of the glue that holds us all together. Very important.
David, I'm thrilled to have you on the programme. Do join us in the studio soon. My thanks to Lieutenant General Arundel David Leakey, CMG CVO CBE. Thank you, sir. Lots more to come on Mark Dolan tonight. Next up, the papers.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. It's time now for tomorrow's papers.
Without his wife.
Hot off the press, we start with tomorrow's Daily Telegraph, and they lead with war crime arrest warrant for Putin. President accused of abducting Ukrainian children by the International Criminal Court. Vladimir Putin has been issued with an arrest warrant. And the Russian president has been accused of war crimes, including forcibly deporting at least hundreds of Ukrainian children, including orphans, to his own country. Bloated COVID inquiry may last up to 7 years. And also, elderly suffer as 1,200 GP practices close. Next up, the Daily Mail newspaper. Passport strike, threat to holidays. Summer holes are at risk from a 5-week strike by passport staff. The walkouts are set to start early next month, just as the busiest period for applications gets underway. The Guardian, NHS doctors offered £5,000 to lure staff into private jobs. Yes, indeed, NHS doctors are being offered cash bonuses of up to £5,000 to recruit colleagues for jobs at private hospitals as commercial healthcare providers compete with an overstretched public health service for new staff. US-owned HCA Healthcare, which runs more than 30 facilities in London and Manchester and claims to be the largest private provider in the world, is spending thousands of pounds recruiting NHS-trained doctors, according to The Guardian. ICC issues Putin arrest warrant for war crimes. That story also appearing in The Guardian. The Times newspaper, holidays hit as passport staff walk out over pay, and a smile and a half. The Princess of Wales had some Guinness after the St Patrick's Day parade at Mons Barracks in Aldershot, Hampshire. The Daily Mirror now. Mirror campaign win, victory over cruel hunters. MPs vote to ban importation of animal body parts as sick trophies. The Daily Express, BBC faces revolt if licence fee rises, a topic covered in our show earlier. I'll get panel reaction in a moment. And for now, the Daily Star. Huge passport delays ahead as strikes shut offices for 5 weeks. We're not going on a summer holiday just when we really need a break. A 5-week strike is going to cause a summer of passports pandemonium. And those are your front pages. For full reaction, I'm delighted to welcome Nina Mishkov, Coolveer Ranger and Peter Lloyd. There you go. A little bit of a life swap situation there for Coolveer and Peter. Let's start, if we can, with bad news. Coolveer for holidaymakers. Passport strike to threat to holidays. 5 weeks of strikes. Another government body that's down tools.
And anxiety levels in people going up immediately as they hear this. You know, even in my household, we have a holiday planned for October, but I know that one of my children's passport is coming to an expiry point. We have enough time. I know my passport's going to expire early next year, but I have to travel for work and various other things. This adds a level of anxiety to the nation as they go into a season for summer holidays, and I think we just didn't need it right now.
No, I mean, everyone's going on strike, aren't they? You'll be next, Peter.
I mean, I would love to go on strike, really. It would be great. I could just put my feet up, have a great time, you know, it'd be lovely. No,
but you're self-employed, so you don't, and you can't.
Well, that's the thing, right? So, no, but as I was saying earlier in the show, you know, I was talking about the constant strikes in the country and that we were essentially being hamstrung and held to ransom at an increasing level, and this is just further proof of that. I mean, what I always get from these stories is that they seem to be so cruel because they're so premeditated. Like, they are designed to cause, obviously, disruption, but maximum upset, maximum disruption, not just for adults or government agencies or politicians, but for families, for children, you know, for people who just want to go away for a break. I think that's what I find really distasteful.
We saw that with the RMT going on strike over Christmas. And
right.
Nick Lynch tried to claim it wasn't over Christmas, but it was the Christmas period, wasn't it? Is the timing of this passport strike cruel?
Well, there's no point in going on strike unless you cause disruption, because who's going to bother? Otherwise?
So it is cruel.
Well, it is. Any strike is cruel. But on the other hand, what I object to is the demonising of people who withdraw their labour. It's every human's right to withdraw their labour. And if you're living in a situation, I don't know the situation of the passport office workers, but if you're living with a situation where you cannot manage and you're having to go to a food bank, or many people are struggling to pay their bills, can't heat their homes, can't feed their children, can't clothe their children, then there has to come a point where you say, we have to do this better. And the strikes that are now being solved at the moment, like in the health service, and I think the rail workers...
That's right. It looks like a deal for the RMT, nurses, ambulance drivers, and tonight, developing story, junior doctors as well, a possible breakthrough.
Yes, but do you realise why it's taken this long? The government has deliberately done this. The rail strike could have been solved last summer, but they would not sit down with the union. They would not sit down. It's as soon as... the teacher strike, as soon as Gillian Keegan agreed to sit down, then that's what happened.
Do you buy that, Claudia?
No, I don't, because with the rail unions, it's the rail delivery group that has to negotiate with them. It's not the government's position to be negotiating with them.
But they are hamstrung. The rail group is hamstrung by what the government will allow them to do.
With due respect, the issue here is inflation and increase in public sector pay. And if unions like the PCS that are demanding at the Passport Office a 10% increase and the government capitulates to that kind of increase, we fuel the flames of inflation that we will all suffer from. So there is a negotiation that needs to happen, and it needs to be reasonable. We have to look at the bigger economic situation that impacts every single one of us. So yes, unions have every right, and I believe in the right to strike. I believe in the right for people to take away their labour when they are not being treated fairly. But we have an economic environment that we are having to deal with, and that's why the right bodies in the government are trying to deal with all the unions. Now, with the passport issue, I will just say...
demonise them, though.
No, no one here is demonising them. I think we're all agreeing that there is a right to strike. But we have to understand the context. And in this country, as in many countries around the world, we have inflation. That's what the government is trying to deal with, which will affect all of us. All of our salaries, all of our ability to pay for goods, the food on our table, everything will continue to go up if we don't get a grip of it. Inflation is the biggest challenge that this country is facing. So I understand that people are suffering. We're all suffering this together. But if we fuel the flames of inflation by increasing pay by the amounts that unions are asking for, we just increase the problem.
But that's a bargaining. It's a bargaining start. Didn't the nurses ask for 19.5? Well, they've settled what for 5%.
5%. Yeah.
So 10% is not going to. It's not going to do that.
What I hope is that they will negotiate and these strikes won't happen, because fundamentally the problem here, as with any of these strikes,
any government get them round the bloody table.
Any of these services are critical, whether it's the junior doctors, whether it's the railway workers, whether it's the passport office. We know they're critical. They affect us all. We don't need this anxiety at the moment, so let's hope that can be solved.
Your
and a negotiation can
former
happen.
policy advisor to Boris Johnson, and these issues were bubbling away under Boris Johnson's premiership. They've come to a head for Rishi Sunak. Looking at this deal with the nurses, 5%. I think there's a COVID recovery fee as well. Obviously, it's modest. It's not what they wanted. A deal for the RMT, a possible deal for the junior doctors. Who's won, the government or the unions?
I think the unions have fought their corner for public sector pay.
So have the government folded?
No, I think the government...
Are the unions running Britain now?
No. I think Rishi Sunak is demonstrating that he is being a strong Prime Minister. He's absolutely
By
not
saying yes
capitulating.
to their wage demands?
Well, he hasn't said yes. He's had to negotiate and get to an agreed position. But also, we have to look at private sector pay. Private sector pay is not increasing at a level of what we see happening in the public sector. In fact, it's stagnating. And so, therefore, there is an argument here about where increase should happen. I think the Prime Minister has to do the right thing for the whole of the country, not just the public sector, and that's why he's having to hold firm on negotiation.
Who's running Britain, Peter Lloyd?
Well, I would say that at the moment it's increasingly the unions. But I know Nina won't like that.
I don't think...
Are there echoes of the 70s?
No, absolutely no.
See, I think we're headed in that direction.
There's absolutely no way.
I think we're headed in that direction.
No, absolutely not. I tell you who I'd like to see running the country, that wonderful army man you were...
David Leakey.
David Leakey.
What a hero.
I would vote for him.
Correct.
Articulate, sane, human,
Correct.
Smart, concise.
Brave in the field, but not willing to tell me when he feared for his life, such is his integrity as a former soldier. You don't make them like that anymore. NHS doctors, Nina, offered £5,000 to lure staff into private jobs. Another headache for the NHS.
Well, it is. And, you know, there's always the worry about, you know, privatisation of the National Health Service by stealth, which is what's been happening, actually. And there are theories that, the government runs down the National Health Service to bring this in, just to
I always think that's a conspiracy theory, considering how much cash goes into the NHS. Well, almost 200 billion a year.
I agree.
Hardly running it down.
I agree, but it's not being run well. That's the problem. That is the absolute problem. It's not being run well, and so this is you know we have a wonderful health service in this country, but it's not as good as we'd like it to be. It's not as good as France, say, or it's not as good as an awful Australia. God forbid, you know, things collapse in the way that some people think the government would like them to collapse, and then we're all paying.
Well, that's really interesting. Is Nina right? Does Nina have a point, Peter Lloyd, that the Tories are deliberately crashing the NHS into a brick wall so they can privatise it?
I don't know. I mean, there might be some merit to that argument, but I just think that's got conspiracy theory written all over it. I mean, that is so tin hat. I don't know. I just think that would be political suicide.
All those Tory cronies, how much money was made out of COVID? How much money was made out of COVID?
Tens of millions.
Tens of millions.
Well, what do you think? You know the Conservative Party, the culture of that party, Colvere. Do you think that there are some in it who would like to see the NHS collapse so they can start again?
There will always be some people who want to reform the NHS. The Labour Party is currently talking about reforming the NHS.
It.
No, but that is it needs change. But I think I've said it on this channel before, and a lot of people are talking about it, including Sir Keir Starmer. The NHS needs fundamental change. The funding that is going into it is unsustainable. The amount of money, it's not run well, because that's why we don't get the outcomes that we seek to get from it. Therefore, something has to change. Plus, we have a two-tier health system now existing in this country, which is private and public. It's happened. It's not privatisation. It's a choice for people. They can choose, if they can afford it, to go private. And that's what's happening by stealth. Private healthcare expanding in this country. Now, the question is, where does that leave the NHS, and what is the future for the NHS if people choose to opt out of it?
And Nina, because the NHS cocked up with their obsessive focus on COVID and essentially locking down, there's a waiting list of 7 million people, and therefore I've got viewers and listeners who are borrowing money or saving up to pay for operations. They're effectively paying twice for the treatment.
They are, but also there's a story on the front page of the Telegraph. Elderly suffer as 1,200 GP practices close.
Yes.
So don't we need to look at how GP practices are run?
Yeah.
Don't we need to look at the whole social care system? That all needs reform. I put this out there because I have no idea. Shouldn't we take back control of GPs into government hands? So that we don't have... I don't know anything about this, but it seems to me that GP practices are not working for patients. You go into practice and there's nobody there.
It's impossible to get an appointment.
Well, you say that, but there's nobody there. There seems to be plenty of space and plenty of time, and yet A&E is stuffed. A&E is completely overrun.
Yeah.
So something is going wrong somewhere.
OK, fascinating stuff. Well, we've got many more things to debate. We've got more front pages coming, including The Independent next. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight, reacting to the big stories of the day. Author and broadcaster Peter Lloyd, former advisor to Boris Johnson, Coolvia Ranger, and journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov. Next up, hot off the press, we have The Independent, and they lead with wanted for war crimes and stealing Ukraine's children. Vladimir Putin issued extraordinary arrest warrant by International Criminal Court. Also in the Indy, Prince Harry told the then Queen, "We can't afford security until Meghan and I earn our own money." And those are your front pages. We've had the Mirror, the Express, the Star and the Telegraph. And can we go back, folks, to one of the papers, and it's the Express. Coolvia, BBC faces revolt if the licence fee rises. We discussed this earlier with John Sargent, former chief political correspondent of the BBC. A possible hike in the cost of the licence fee from £159 to £173.
Yes, and it looks like another own goal probably coming up for the BBC after Lineker Gate, because these are the kind of political challenges that we know the BBC are facing in the run-up to the review of their Royal Charter, how it tackles the economic model it's facing against other platforms, whether people want to defund it. And this is now another issue that's really going to run for them. And the question is, after Lineker Gate, how damaged is the brand of the BBC, and how fragmented is the debate about people who are supporting the kind of issues that threw up about individual presenters, the authority that they have, how they can be impartial or not, as the case may be, and the authority of BBC executives, including the Director General. Now we're looking at the price going up. I think this adds fuel to the fire of that debate, because people want to understand what the BBC is about and what it's going to stand for if they're going to continue to pay for it as the price goes up.
Peter Lloyd, can't the Beeb make do with £3.5 billion a year?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? You'd think they'd be able to get along just fine with that amount of money, but apparently not. And, you know, they're exploiting people who are already suffering a cost of living crisis. They want to squeeze even more money out of them. It's absolutely outrageous.
Well, I tell you what we should be spending our money on, Nina Mishkov, is Guinness. Because it is St Patrick's Day. You're wearing some lovely green nail varnish.
Especially for...
You've done your bit. Peter is rocking the emerald T-shirt. And
I'm still hoping for an England win tomorrow.
Is that it? That's your big
in the
focus.
Rugby. So, just to get some
How disastrous
semblance
was that? I know nothing about
against-
sport, but everybody knows how dreadful that was. What was it, 162 to 4?
Something like that. The
We don't talk about
humiliation
that,
against the French.
Not great. Not a good look. Well, look, happy St Patrick's Day to everyone. We all love it. The world comes out to celebrate. But has it kept its spiritual roots, or is it now just an excuse to get mad and merry on Guinness? Is St Patrick's Day an excuse to go down the pub and sink pints of Guinness?
Can I say
I sincerely
Cheltenham?
hope so.
Cheltenham was fantastic this week. Britain enjoying itself, the racing. Well done to the Jockey Club. Dare I say, a friend of mine is there. But the Guinness was drunk. The horse racing was fantastic, and that showed people having a great time. When people talk this country down, let's remember that people are having a great time, and actually we have things to celebrate. And I think that was fantastic in a week that's been riddled with strikes and political strife over the budget. I'm glad Cheltenham, and I hope the rugby at the weekend gives people something to cheer about.
Can I ask?
As well as your birthday.
Well, God bless you for that.
Happy
Thanks
birthday.
for reminding me. But it's a celebration of St Patrick. It's an Irish celebration, Nina. Why is it so globally popular?
I think it's not just globally. It's America because they've got a huge Irish heritage there. I mean, have you ever been in America on St Patrick's Day?
It's crazy. New York.
It's bonkers. I was in Atlanta,
yeah.
which is the headquarters of Coca-Cola there, and they have fountains. They have Coca-Cola. They turned all the fountains green. I mean, it's just bonkers what they do there. The St Patrick's Day parade.
And of course, there is there is a big expat Irish community in America, and you've got the sort of the Kennedy dynasty, political dynasty. So it's a big thing. But I wonder whether it's just the fact that around the world people love Irish culture.
Well, they do, and I think also the fact that it's not unconnected with alcohol. Let's put it that way.
It's got an alcoholic drink attached to it.
Exactly.
It's a good move, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's for the crack. It's
Guinness,
for the crack.
And Guinness is... I remember those Guinness ads years
I'll
ago.
stick to Guinness, thanks.
Guinness is good for you. It's got iron in it. I mean, I don't drink beer. I don't drink
Pregnant
Guinness.
women were prescribed it in the 70s.
Doctors used to tell people to drink it.
If you're anemic, it's good for you.
Yeah, there you go. Now, listen,
excuse, anyway.
this is hardly a jolly story to end on, but war crime arrest warrant for Putin, Peter Lloyd. This guy is no doubt guilty of war crimes, but, I mean, is this going to have any impact whatsoever? Is he quaking in his boots?
No, as if he is. No, he doesn't care. Do you really think he's bothered about this? I think this is more of a PR exercise, really.
But, well, I was thinking that, Peter, but having heard what your guest, Lieutenant General David Leakey, did say, he was effectively saying this is a long war, this is going to go on, and things like this need to happen to remind people of what's going on.
No, I agree.
Keep it at the front of people's minds, because we are invariably in a third world war, and so we need to keep the pressure on and keep the focus on fighting it.
That's really what I mean when I say that it's a PR exercise.
There's no way that Plod is going to turn up at the Kremlin with a pair of handcuffs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Well, look, a fantastic debate we've had. Many thanks to Coolbeard, to Nina and to Peter. And most importantly, to you for your company, whether you're listening on the radio or watching on TV. Do join me. We're back tomorrow from 8 till 11 for the People's Hour, Mark Meets and much more. Next up, it's Headliners.
Hello there. I'm Jonathan Botry, here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Many of us will have to hold out until Sunday for the best of the weather throughout this weekend, because through Friday evening and into Saturday, it's low pressure that is very much in charge, bringing fronts across much of the UK in a generally unsettled setup. So as we move throughout Friday evening, there will be showers and longer spells of rain across pretty much all areas of the country. A few clearer spells here and there, and where that comes with lighter winds, we could see the odd mist and fog patch forming, perhaps some sea fog forming around some coasts as well. But underneath that cloud, temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius. Just that bit chillier up in the far north, Shetland down to around 3 degrees Celsius. Throughout Saturday, then a continued risk of showers throughout the day. More persistent though across areas of Scotland and Northern Ireland, turning quite damp for here at a time. Some of the showers across England and Wales could certainly be heavy, and there's a risk of some hail and thunderstorms in the mixture there as well. But where you're in the sunny intervals in between, it will feel